Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming to our webinar. I see people entering the room. I see some new names. It's nice to see some new folks. Welcome. We'll get started in a couple minutes. Just give people a chance to sign on. I won't delay too long. Since you all signed up for a 3:00 webinar, I won't take too much of your time waiting for folks to show up, but I'm always one person that's scrambling to find the link. So I like to give everybody a minute or two of grace time. In the meantime, I'd like to ask folks to put in the chat their name and where they're from. It's always great to see what organizations people are from, where they're operating out of. Nice to see you guys. Welcome, everyone. All right. Welcome, welcome. To those just coming in, if you would drop your name and your organization into the chat so people can see who else is here, if there's anybody from their location or their neighbors. Great. Why don't we go on to the housekeeping slide, Jake? So just a few reminders here. Please drop your questions into the Q&A as we go, not the chat, but the Q&A. If you can't figure that out, because I know some browsers it's hard to find, or if you're on your phone, you can put it in the chat. But if you put it in the Q&A, it's easier for us to manage. We'll also have a recording of this presentation, which will be emailed to everybody who registered within the next few days. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll provide you with a couple of links. We'll have a link to request a follow-up meeting, some information about September's webinar, and then information about our upcoming conference, which we are having in October 12th through 13th, and how to get tickets to that. And there we'll go more into depth on a lot of topics that are really relevant for food recovery. And we're focusing this year on actionable takeaways. So we're asking all the speakers to be able to give our participants some, ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. How do you do this? I've been to a lot of wonderful conferences that are very inspiring, but I still come away without any idea how I can use that information other than to be inspired. And our goal is really to give you a lot of best practice information from across the food recovery network and universe. So, all right. So when we think about food safety and we think about talking to donors about food safety, most of us start at the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, right? We're always quick to tell our donors, if they don't know about it, that the Bill Emerson Act protects them from liability. As long as they're donating in good faith, they can't be sued. Then even more recently, next slide, Jake, we saw the passage of the Food Donation Improvement Act. This added some really important requirements or important additions to the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. But even more important, I think it shows that both the legislative branch and the executive branch are still really behind and supportive of food donation of surplus food. So a lot of times when we're talking to donors, this is sort of what we throw out as the definitive word on food safety, on any concerns about liability, and on whether or not they should be donating to you. But in reality, next slide, Jake. That is not what most donors' biggest concern is. For most food donors, when it comes to food safety, their biggest concern is the PR nightmare that would happen if someone got sick from their food. And we see this all the time. There are headlines. The milkshake incident was like 2 days ago. Those of you on the West Coast may have heard about it, but 3 people died after drinking contaminated milkshakes. Really tragic. And of course, the restaurants, the grocery stores, the locations that provide that food then take a huge hit to their reputation. They lose a lot of money. And in some cases, they go completely out of business. Like Chi-Chi's is the, I think, cautionary tale of what could happen. If you don't remember that, I think it was in the early 2000s, something like 500 people ate at Chi-Chi's. There were contaminated scallions and they got hepatitis, and a bunch of people died. Chi-Chi's went bankrupt. It's no longer around in the United States. And that is what is the biggest fear of food donors. So when you're talking to food donors, simply mentioning the Food Donation Improvement Act or the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act is not going to be enough to make them feel comfortable donating food. So how do we do that? What donors really want is, first of all, they want to know, or they want the reality to be that their donated food is treated according to safety protocols. That's first and foremost. They want their food transported, donated, treated safely. Second, they want confidence that your organization knows how to do that, understands what that means. And third, they want the comfort, that your organization not only has safety procedures built into your operations, but that you also are following them. So I'm going to talk through these 3 steps and how we can take steps to make sure that we're doing this and that our donors can see this and feel, really good about this. First of all, food being treated according to safety protocols. Next slide. The first thing you should do is your staff, your operations staff, the person that's in charge of creating your operations, running your operations, should be certified in food safety. Now, ServSafe is certainly the most well-known of these courses, but there's others out there, and it doesn't really matter where you get your certification, but having that piece of paper that says that your operations staff, that the people that are responsible for figuring out how that food is going to get picked up and get where it's going, understand food safety is gold. That is something that you cannot overestimate the importance of. And it is, can you just go back one, Jake? Not done. There we go. And I would suggest the full ServSafe Food Protection Manager certification. So it's a 2-day course. It's a 2-day investment of your time to get that piece of paper that is going to really open the door for you at a lot of locations that are very concerned about food safety. But it also gives you the ability to then put those procedures into your operations. Next slide. And there, when you're creating your operations, when you're building your food recovery operations, make sure that you have protocols and that you understand the difference between food that requires TCS, or temperature control, time and temperature controlled for safety, and that which doesn't. Those are 2 different categories of food, and they require 2 different levels of attention. So most organizations simply think, okay, well, it's time and temperature controlled for safety. Either we're going to throw everything in a refrigerated truck, or we're just going to have some sort of protocols for TCS food, and we're not going to worry about non-TCS food. But non-TCS food, this sounds like a no-brainer, right? Totally obvious. Don't put a bag of bagels next to toxic chemicals, right? Who would do that? Hopefully nobody. But if you have those procedures written down, those are your standard operating procedures, right? That is a confidence builder for your donor partners and for your recipient partners. And frankly, it's just good practice to say the obvious, because there's always going to be somebody who doesn't think about it, right? Who has their car full of paint or I don't know, weed killer, and maybe they're bringing their groceries home next to the weed killer, but we don't want our donated food next to that. So just having those protocols written out is really important. So don't forget about food that doesn't require temperature and time control for safety. Next slide. But I want to stress that TCS food is also time and temperature controlled, right? It doesn't all require passive cooling or a refrigerated vehicle. And this is really important to bring up because providing passive cooling for your donated food can be very expensive, and it can limit the amount of rescuing that you can do. If you're required to provide, have a refrigerated vehicle to pick up TCS food, that is going to knock out any small organization from picking up TCS food. If you require giving volunteers a insulated bag to put TCS food in, that's also going to knock out a lot of small organizations or limit the amount of volume that you can rescue, because you're going to be limited to the 10 volunteers that have a cooler. But time is a legitimate safety control. So that's one thing that, and we just went through in Pittsburgh I don't want to say a fight, but we went through a conversation with our local health department, who, in all good faith, wanted to create some structure and make it more possible for organizations to rescue food and donors to feel comfortable that there were standards. And they had required passive cooling for rescuing food, which would have killed us. It would have killed our program at 412 Food Rescue, because more than half of our volume is done by volunteers. We have thousands of volunteers that do rescue. We could not provide passive cooling to all of those volunteers. What we were able to do, though, is show that food that is TCS is matched with a partner that is within, say, 5 miles. And then because of our app, we also have the data to show that it's not out of refrigeration from the time it's picked up to the time it's dropped off at the partner for more than 15 minutes, right? So we're able to show how time is protecting that food. So if you're going to be rescuing TCS food and you don't have the capacity to do it in a refrigerated vehicle, sometimes it's not practical. If it's small, if it's 2 pans of prepared food, think about time and how you can utilize the time control. And if anyone balks at this, think about grocery shopping. Do you have a cooler in your car for when you bring your groceries home? Maybe if you live in Arizona, I don't know. Although your car probably has air conditioning, and then maybe not, but I certainly don't. I just put my groceries in the back of my car. Whole Foods and our local grocery store and Target, which deliver food to my house, they don't put the refrigerated goods into cooled containers either. So as an industry, there's a lot of practice in using time as a temperature control. But for some reason, it has been sort of assumed that food recovery is not going to do that, or not capable of doing that, or doesn't understand. And so if you can write those protocols and demonstrate how you are using time as a safety control, you are able to increase the amount of TCS food you can rescue, while giving your donors confidence in your ability to keep that food safe. But don't forget the end result either. Protect your food from the donor to the recipient. And again, this is all about creating an operation which is designed to keep your food safe so that your donors will have utmost confidence and comfort in donating to you. So who are you donating food to? Know your partners. When you onboard a partner, It should be standard operating procedure to check, do they understand how to keep TCS food safe? Is somebody on their staff a certified food handler or food manager? Keep track of what locations are and what locations aren't. And then you can simply only send food that is vulnerable, TCS food, to places that have somebody capable of handling it. So a great example is a lot of the grab and go food that comes from a convenience store. Convenience stores are becoming a really big partner for a lot of food recovery organizations. But a lot of the food that comes from convenience stores is TCS food, and it's really highly TCS food, right? Grab and go sandwiches and grab and go salads are really one of the top categories I would be concerned about the food safety for. So you want to make sure that when you send that somewhere, you send it to somewhere that knows that needs to be refrigerated until it's consumed or until it's distributed, not set out on a table for 2 hours. And if you are tracking who's able to do that, then you can, again, project that confidence to your donors. Find out also how much storage they have, including and especially refrigeration. You don't want to send 600 trays of lasagna to an organization that has a standard kitchen size refrigerator, because they're not going to be able to distribute that quick enough and store it safely until they can distribute it. And finally, as a I wouldn't say last resort, but as a bonus option, as an addition, you can provide training to recipients that maybe don't have somebody on site. So we work with a lot of housing sites, housing authority sites, daycare centers, veterans job training programs, places like that that are not traditional food distribution networks. We're able to provide them with serve safe food handler training. It's, I think, like $12 or $15 online. And that provides us, it provides them, and it provides the donor with the confidence that they can manage any donation that comes in the door safely. Next. So if you've created this, back. Thank you. If you've created this standard operating procedures that is based in food safety, our best practices, food safety best practices, that is step one. Step two is giving your donors confidence that you understand food safety and that your SOP includes food safety protocols. So brag about your team being food safe certified. That's incredible. When I tell grocery chains that, our staff is Serve Safe certified, they are relieved. Some of them are surprised to hear that. The thing I hear most is, oh, okay, that's great. That's great. Because that takes away their first fear, is that we are willy-nilly rescuing food without knowing what to do with it. Now, that may be an unreasonable fear on their part, but they have it. And so all you need is that piece of paper to immediately shut down any concern that you don't know about food safety. Second, create a food safety one-pager for prospective donors. Be really upfront with how you protect the safety of the food. And it doesn't, again, a lot of them are going to think it needs to be a reefer truck. A lot of them are going to think you need to have some really expensive, highly technical process to keep food safe. You don't. You really don't. You want to show them that you are going to consider what type of food is being donated and make sure that it follows the food safety protocol for that type of food and how you're going to do it. And it will calm any concerns that they may have if you don't have a refrigerated vehicle. And finally, Jake, you're excited today. Your trigger finger is real happy. Finally, demonstrate your success with pilots or graduated partnerships. If you have a donor that's really concerned about food safety and it's like, oh, I don't want to donate to you, see if you can ease them into it by doing a pilot with something that's not TCS. So whole produce, for example, is generally not TCS. Frankly, dairy is not TCS either. It's not a safety concern if dairy goes bad, but start with something really easy like whole produce or bread or pastries and show them what you've got. Create a program where you're picking up that food, where you're sending them the reports, where they understand how you work, and they can develop that confidence in your team and in your operations, and then move up to doing TCS food rescue. So it doesn't always have to be all or nothing at the beginning. And then, of course, they want comfort. So you've given them sort of the confidence. They see that you know what you're talking about. They believe that you understand food safety and what they want. But are they comfortable? Do they fully trust you? Do they know that you're going to follow those procedures? So to provide them with that comfort, and this is really, really key, you want to foster that relationship. If you're talking about something like a grocery store chain, the best thing you can do is get to know their food safety leader. Early on in the relationship, if somebody has any concerns about food safety, even if they don't, meet the folks on their food safety team, talk to them about your food safety protocols, talk to them about what you can do, and then listen to them. What are their concerns? Where have you not given them the confidence that they need? And how can you adjust your partnership or design a partnership that will give them that confidence and comfort? And then, as I said earlier, start with a pilot. Demonstrate reliability. Let's say you want to work with a convenience store chain for grab and go food, and you could convince them to do a one store pilot, grabbing that TCS food. Show them how you have treated that food safely, how you know the food has gotten where it was supposed to get on time. What safety protocols do you have and checks do you have to make sure things happened as they were supposed to? And then provide them with that data. Be transparent, right? Show them how you know, show them how you respected their food and how it was your program was successful. This will give them, again, that trust and that comfort that you not only know what food safety is and have the protocols, but that you are committed over time to continuing to live up to that promise of food safety. Right. And that's the thing. And that can only happen over time, is showing them that you are committed long term to continuing to meet the standard that you set out in that initial meeting. So don't think of this as a one and done. Go in, prove that you know what you're doing, and then disappear. Continuing to provide them with reports, continuing to grow that relationship and foster that, gives them that comfort and might allow you to expand further. Not only that, but they will then become your biggest advocates. Again, just to tell you a personal story, when we started with Giant Eagle, which is a regional chain in 4 states here in the not quite Midwest, Pennsylvania over, they were very skeptical, and we did exactly this. We started with bread and produce, and we presented to their food safety team, and we got them on board, and they really became our biggest advocates. They helped us get into their convenience store. They've had us speak at their local food safety meetings. And when we were talking to the local health department about our standards for rescue and why temperature control was a burden, that store's food safety director came in and testified for us. And that's what you want. You want to build that type of trust and relationship, and you can only do that by continuing to prove your commitment over time. Next. So in sum, build those operations based on a thorough understanding of food safety, demonstrate that it's a top priority, and then build comfort over time by fostering that relationship, demonstrating that reliability, and continuing to show your commitment to treating their donations safely over time. And that's that. I will open it up for questions.
So Jen, the first question we've got is, what about the use of a Cambro Cambro Go box, which I believe is some sort
I
of
know it is.
great.
Yep.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely. A Cambro Go box is great. The limitation with the Cambro Go box is they're expensive, and you can only have so many of them unless your organization is super rich. You can only have so many of them, and you couldn't really provide them to volunteers. So it's really going to limit the number of rescues you can do of that type. What we're looking to do is to scale food rescue, to do food rescue on a really large scale, as much food rescued as we can, to as many partners as we can, without it being prohibitive to a nonprofit organization to actually do. So cameras are great for sure. But again, you can use time as a control for some donations, and that is free,
Yeah,
basically.
Jen, I want to, amend that to, you can use time as a control for almost all donations that we do with our system. And the other thing is, to add on to that is that logistically it becomes very difficult to provide all of your volunteers, not just because of cost, but because if that volunteer ever requests a sub or drops that donation rescue entirely, you have to figure out how to get that that container back from that volunteer and get the container to a different volunteer who then picks up that rescue. So it provides another logistical issue.
Yeah, and we have tried that, and that is very that is very much a giant nightmare for your operations team. I do want to say that the Cambro is very useful if you're rescuing hot food, but I would generally recommend against rescuing hot food if you can help it. Most places that have hot food to deliver will have a blast chiller. And if they can blast chill it for you and freeze it, it makes it much more usable, because your partners, if you've got hot food, are they ready to either eat that food immediately as soon as it arrives or blast chill it themselves? Uh, but restaurants will generally, and caterers and institutions will generally blast chill their hot food and or freeze it for you, which makes it much easier to rescue and frankly more useful for the recipients too.
I don't know if we said this, but the time in which food can be out of temp is 4 hours, by the way. Did we, I don't know if you actually said that during your presentation. So that's another thing too. So important to remember. So that is a pretty large, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, but you really want it to be much shorter than that. If you can demonstrate that your food is only out of temp for 20 minutes, 30 minutes,
Agreed.
it gives the food a lot more life where it's going as well.
Yes. Yeah. Just in terms of safety protocol, 4 hours generally. So next question is from Sheila. Do you have a food safety one-pager template to share?
So we don't. And the reason we don't is because it's highly dependent on what your operations are. The food safety template should not be generic. It should be designed specifically to talk about how your organization has standard operating procedures that protect the integrity of the food. That's, again, really important, because what it does is it shows those donors that might be reluctant or might have some, really incorrect information in their head, that your organization specifically understands these issues, built their operations around it, and has a leaflet to explain it.
Next question is from Meg. Can non-TCS food that is left over from a buffet, say if it was partially consumed, be rescued?
So I believe that there's no law against it, though I would check with local health departments. However, I would suggest against it. I think it's bad practice. We don't take things that have been served on a buffet. The opportunity for contamination is really great on a buffet. And it doesn't even have to be like intentional contamination. Someone could sneeze on it or, drop something in the food. So we avoid buffet food. What we do to maximize the amount of food that is available for rescue from a place that maybe like a wedding that has a buffet is work with caterers to adjust how much food they're putting out on the buffet at any given time. Later in the night, switching to half pans or serve on request, as opposed to like refilling an entire hotel pan an hour before an event ends.
There's also differences between a self-serve buffet and a buffet that is served behind a sneeze guard with professionals. But either way, buffets are often tricky.
Yes.
Next question is from Lanthan. Does anyone have experience using sheet pans as quote shelves in a Cambro to use for supporting aluminum pans,
Oh, I see.
disposal pans versus actual hotel pans?
Um, we don't. That's a nifty idea.
Yeah.
If anybody has any information about that, if they can drop it into the chat, that would be great. Certainly, it would probably prevent some spillage of those flimsy disposable pans. But again, that's equipment that that's really going to limit it to somebody that's doing staff rescues instead of volunteer rescues.
Brian asked, any insights on how companies like DoorDash and Uber Eats may have circumvented some of those food safety requirements? Who knows if DoorDash drivers also delivering soil or used toilet chemicals while also delivering my burrito?
That is a great question. I do not know. So again, this is going to probably come down to county health department codes, but most county health departments do not have specific requirements for food delivery. And there isn't regulation. It's kind of the Wild West. But again, similarly, if you go pick up food to go, do you put it in a cooler? The chemical thing I can't speak to, but the timing, but the temperature control, it's just so quick. It's door to door. It's like you're picking up your own food, which is much like a lot of volunteer run food rescue.
Jonathan asked, how do you go about food safety? How do you go about safety precautions with volunteers? Does volunteer need to do a serve safe certification?
No, they do not. We do at Food Rescue Hero, we do a like a SMS delivered short food safety course for transporting food safely, which is basically just what we said. Don't stop and have dinner while there's food in the car. Don't put food next to chemicals. Make sure it's in a clean area. Don't have your dog in the car, that sort of thing. And I know other organizations do a volunteer training similar to that. They don't need to be serve safe or even externally certified. Just something simple with those basics is adequate.
Michelle asked, we have a grant, so that might be better. Time as a control in our county is hard with traffic issues.
I don't know what county you're in.
Yep, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I don't know also what that is directly in reference to, but
there are some very busy counties that have managed volunteer rescue without special equipment. And they do that a couple of different ways. So keeping food close to where it's picked up. Traffic is bad, but usually you can get around the corner. They do it with off-hour rescues. I know some organizations have used bicycles and bicycle couriers, which are great, depending on how big the donation is. And the other thing is, remember, a lot of food that's donated, probably the majority of food that's donated, is not TCS, right? It's a small subset of what you're donating. So if you have a donor that is not able to, that's donating TCS food, that's in a really difficult area for traffic, that isn't near any nonprofits that you want to drop off at, that you can't, the rescue can't be moved to a different time of day, then that is definitely a candidate for temperature control. The thing is, if you only have to temperature control that one rescue, right, then you can do all the rest with volunteers. And so that's kind of something that we do in Pittsburgh, and that I know a lot of our partners do as well, is you really look at the rescues as they come in and slot them into the appropriate rescue mechanism, whether it's going to be a truck, a van, or a volunteer. what is necessary for food safety, what's necessary for the volume of the rescue, what's necessary for the time and the hassle of the rescue. But if you have those different variable options, it allows you to really expand the amount of food that you can rescue, expand the amount of donors you can work with, and really ramp up your impact.
Suzanne asked, is hot held food considered safe if blast chilled?
Yes, with an asterisk. Hot held food can only be held for 4 hours.
Yeah, I think either way, if it's at temp at above 141 or below 41 degrees, or if it's within that range, it's 4 hours.
Time for me to renew my ServSafe certification.
I think I also have to do it, by the way. I think it's been 5 years.
Mine is actually up. I do need to do that. I don't work directly with our donors, donations anymore, but I still want to have that information fresh in my brain. But yeah, so hot held food can be held for 4 hours, then it needs to be tossed. I would not blast chill food that had been held for 4 hours, right? I think you really want to look at how long it's been hot held, and that's a conversation you can have with your donor. Some donors are willing to pull it off early, especially if it's the quality is not what their customers want. After 2 hours, they can pull it off, blast chill it, and donate it. If it's a buffet for an employee served buffet at an event or a cafeteria, oftentimes that's a shorter window than 4 hours, so that can be blast chilled. But something that's been held for 4 hours isn't it? I would say no.
Randy had a string of comments that I'll read aloud. In line with the Cambro idea, we prefer NSF. I'm not sure what NSF is. NSF containers, when containers are needed for rescue, they can sometimes be donated from food service. We rescue buffet pans that have not been in public backstock, and also used buckets that commercial food came in that are great. NSF snap-on lids are reusable.
Is that like food safe plastic? I'm not sure. The snap lids.
Not sure.
So there are other food safety trainings out there. A lot of them are state-based. So without knowing where you are, that is hard for me to recommend. I would like an alternative. If anyone knows of a really good national alternative that has some online training, I would really like it. Right.
So one more question.
Yeah.
Food safe plastic. They are readily available. Okay.
Okay. Were there any questions in the?
I didn't see any questions in the Q&A, although I haven't been monitoring it. So somebody let me know if I overlooked their question. I'm going to drop a few links in the chat right now for next month's webinar, which is right there. I'll also drop. Go ahead, Jen.
No, you go.
Well, if you want to talk about next month's webinar, go for it.
Well, I just wanted to finish up talking about food safety. And again, sure, the having a refrigerated vehicle take food from point A to point B is always the absolute safest and gold standard you can do. The issue with that is not all organizations can afford a refrigerated vehicle, and most food doesn't need it. And if you really want to scale your operations and your impact, you really need to be able to do as much without those expensive materials as you can. Even with a grant, you're still going to be limited in how much you can do. We have trucks. We've got two trucks and 2 refrigerated vans, and we still need our volunteers to be doing rescues of TCS food. It would be extraordinarily expensive for us to have our trucks do all of our TCS food rescues. And it would put us out of business. And that's really good food that needs to get to people. So finding ways to do that safely that don't require that expensive investment is really important. And then being able to talk to your donors about how you're doing that will give them the confidence to donate to you and to work with you on that. So that's really what I wanted to kind of bring forth the idea of in this webinar, is how you can create operations that will give donors confidence in your ability to rescue food safely with or without a refrigerated vehicle. And then next month's webinar is, we're really excited and lucky to have Clancy Harrison, who is the founder of the Food Dignity Movement. She does a lot. She's got a podcast and does a lot of talking on food dignity. And we're going to talk about how food recovery has sort of built into it the natural capacity for allowing us to promote food dignity and how we can do that. So really excited for next month's webinar. And then just one more pitch for the conference. We would love for you all to join us for the conference in October. We will have speakers from, it won't be me. You won't have to hear from me. I might do one thing, I promise. You won't have to listen to me talk. It'll be lots of other people, like someone from Albertsons grocery stores, ADUSA grocery stores, as well as people in food recovery industry are going to be talking about how to do things in food rescue, what their best practices are, what their experience has taught them, and how you can learn from them. And Randy, who asked a lot of questions here, will be doing a breakout session on how to start a food rescue. So we hope to see you at the conference.
Yeah, on that note, Susan asked, who developed the Food Rescue Hero app? Can other organizations use it? It was developed in-house by an engineering team in Pittsburgh. Can other organizations use it? Absolutely. I am going to drop a contact link in the chat now. Please fill that out. It will populate an email to me. I'll get in touch with you and we can talk about what it takes, how to start a food rescue, and I can answer all your questions more directly.
And then I want to, Carlin asked, I'm with a staffed org doing hot food rescue, and sometimes it's tough to know how much handholding is too much when it comes to guiding donors to adhere to food safety practices. Don't want to discourage donations by making it cumbersome for donors. Any thoughts on this? Absolutely. Definitely you don't want to make it cumbersome for donors, but donors also really care about food safety. So I think if it's finding that middle ground where it is convenient and easy for staff to do it while following food safety guidelines. So I think that having conversations with whoever is in charge of food safety at that donor, whether it's a food safety department or a head chef or somebody like that, and somebody that understands the operations, and coming together to identify what the protocol is, what the best practice is, then you can go back to them and say, hey, your guys aren't following the rules that you set out, right? This is what you said you wanted to keep this food safe, and your team is not doing this. Can we help you train them? Can we help in any way? But it really sets those expectations to start with, so that you don't have to be that, naggy voice that's always coming in and annoying their folks. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And it was a great conversation, a lot of really good questions. So thankful for all of your participation. Hopefully we'll see you next month or at our conference in October. All right. How do we end this, Jake? Here we go. Oh, we're still not ended. We have to end.